We like to teach children that they have every opportunity to succeed and to achieve the American dream. But what happens when they grow up to discover that their ideal picture of society is not reality? In the U.S., every child has the right to opportunity for an equitable education. This means the quality of education offered among students should be as comparable as possible. Does this play out in real life?
No. If you grow up in a certain neighborhood or environment, some kids aren't afforded the same opportunities. Some of the educational programs aren't the greatest. Some books are out of date. So if schools don't have money, then they can't get the proper equipment, computer equipment. They can't get the proper books. None of that. So
no, because their family's wealth can partially determine that if they're a wealthier family, then they're more likely to get more education and a better education compared to low-income families.
Yes, I feel like lots of people have equal opportunities, but I feel like sometimes it is harder they have opportunities, but sometimes it's harder for them to get those opportunities. Does that make sense?
The truth is, many factors are keeping educational opportunities unequal in America.
I would say greatly because, like I said, if the community isn't putting a demand on a kid's education, their children's education, then nothing's going to get done.
I feel like low-income families in neighborhoods don't get as well of an education because there's not as much money going into funding that education.
If the neighborhood where like your child is going to school, if it's a lower income school, sometimes I don't know, sometimes you may not get the same opportunities if you're like in a higher income neighborhood with schools. So that could have an effect.
Parents with higher income are more likely to be willing and able to pay into their child's education. This allows the school to spend more and expand the available opportunities to its students. On the other hand, while lower-income schools are given federal funding to supplement local funding, the U.S. Department of Education reports that more than 40% of students in lower-income areas lack the proper state and local funding. Race is another prominent factor in the inequality of education.
For Huntington, West Virginia, no. But I would say yes for certain bigger cities like Chicago or something like that.
You don't think that happens here? Like where we live, people around where we live, it's mostly a black community. And if you go to richer neighborhoods, a lot of times you won't find that many black people living there. Like you won't find almost any white people in our neighborhood.
That's true.
Although it's not like enforced, sometimes racial segregation happens just because it happens, not because it's enforced by anyone.
True.
I don't feel like it does, like it's controlled by like the government or anything. I feel like just races sometimes tend to live in the same neighborhoods because maybe it makes them feel more comfortable or something.
I feel like yes, in some areas, not all areas, but there are some areas that probably do still have racial segregation, and maybe not so much like for instance, people may be more scared in a particular area. For instance, like where I live, more people that are not, my race sometimes are like nervous going through that neighborhood just because they're not because there's really not that many people other than African Americans.
So the people who live there, it's mostly African American areas.
Yes.
But if you went somewhere else, it would be like maybe you find an area that's like mostly white or
Yes.
so kind of people of the same race kind of like gather together.
Yes.
Although not enforced by any entity other than normal social trends, racial segregation between neighborhoods still exists. Inner cities and poor communities are often mostly made of minorities, while richer communities and suburbs have a lower ratio of minorities to whites. Our book says that 27.6% of African Americans, 25.3% of Hispanics, and 12.3% of Asian Americans live in poverty, compared to 9.8% of non-Hispanic whites. So a minority child is much more likely to end up in a low-income neighborhood with a subpar school. Our book also says that often people we consider bad are just powerless. Lower-income families have less of 3 out of 4 types of social control. People are more likely to be deviant and even participate in crime when they see little opportunity and chance for success, have weak family, peer, and social ties, and little involvement in legitimate activities or jobs. But how do we see deviance?
I would say that it does play a main factor. I would say because if all you see are drugs, all you see are like I don't know, drug dealers having these great cars, all this money, all this other stuff, then you see that as a way out. You see that as an opportunity to get better things, and you feel that well, if I can't dribble a basketball, if I can't throw a football, if I can't rap a lyric, then I don't have a way out. So I think some criminal activities do stem from,
You think if people have less legitimate opportunities that they'll seek alternative routes to
right.
try to find their way to make it?
I feel like society plays a little bit of a role, like because society partly helps shape who you turn out to be, but I feel like it's more who that person is and how they reacted to and dealt with what society and life has thrown at them.
It depends, because I feel like there are some people that really, like, maybe due to past situations or maybe just due to not, well, in a way, it could be from things that they've gone through earlier in life, but I don't necessarily think people are just born with the intent to do necessarily complete evil in a way. Like, sometimes I feel like, there are people out there that really just kind of do have that intent. They're born with it that way, but there are some people that really have been corrupted by, like, maybe situations at home or situations that have gotten them into where they feel like they have to. Like, for instance, like if they don't have money, like for their children or something, sometimes they feel like they need to steal in order to provide for their family instead of like asking. Sometimes that's just how they try to correct situations.
In the words of Thomas More in his book Utopia, if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners to be corrupted from their infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, what else is to be concluded from this but that you first make thieves and then punish them?